You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to thewritingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello and welcome to this week's Friday Night Chat Show. It's an absolute pleasure to be back. Yes, I'm glowing bright red again with sunburn. Again this week, I apologize. It's clashing quite brightly with my orange t-shirt. Chris is sat here with me as always. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. I wasn't going to comment on the t-shirt, but because you brought it up, it's a perfect blend of it really your face and your t-shirt.
It's a great contrast between us as well, because you have not yet caught the sun, and I really have. Yeah, it's going to be a really good show today. We've got a great guest on, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of laughter and a lot of good stories to come from this through writing and life experience as well. So we're looking forward to getting into that. And Chris, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I did a tweet about what was the best book to screen adaptation. And if you remember, I said that the Lockwood & Co. Army came out in their masses and basically said that is the best. And they were very passionate about that. So off the back of that, I sent an email to someone who is an agent of that said author who wrote the series. And they have got back in touch, and we've kind of booked him in for August, which is a great result. And I've tweeted that today, and it's gone wild again. They are really a passionate group, and I think that's going to be a great show when that comes around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised we managed to fit him in with the busy schedule that we've got. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting to him. I'm not going to lie, I'm going to have to read the books now because you know, I know there's a lot of hype about them. I know when you first told me. I had a little look. I was like, these books are designed for 10-year-olds. Like,
yeah. Well, I've been watching the series on Netflix. It's actually pretty good. Malingo says it's like a salmon and a goth. Brilliant. Yeah. Also, what I tweeted about this week, we've had some good replies to. What is the funniest or strangest thing you've Googled or researched in the name of writing? Have you got an answer to that, Chris?
I think obviously the usual sort of like getting rid of a body type thing is, you know, I've done that. I looked at how to make napalm. Yeah, that was a bit feisty because I was writing a story about a guy who was trying to create it and make his own, and then it went wrong. So he got one ingredient wrong. But in order to know the ingredients, you had to kind of do a bit of research.
Incredible.
So yeah, I'm slightly worried about my search history at some points.
Yeah.
But yeah. Have you got any similar situations?
Just kind of hotels and ladies' perfume and stuff. It's very questionable if the wife was to look at my search history. And yeah, so that was down to the second of my book series that you read, Chris, with Daisy and Jade going out in Quebec, I believe they were. So hotels in Quebec, fashion clothes for the ladies. So the tweets replies we had, there was two good ones. Nathaniel Swift said, the crater on Mars that looks like a smiley face. Do you know about that, Chris?
I don't, but I'm intrigued. Smiley face on Mars.
Well, I'm going to show it to you now, and it's actually a thing. And there it is.
Wow. That does look very much like a smiley face.
So for the podcast listeners, it's basically, you can Google it and you'll find it. It looks like a wonky smiley face that looks like a pancake, but it's basically a crater on Mars. So that's a pretty good one. And the second one that I really kind of find interesting, because I've never thought about this before, was Laura Mortison's reply, which was whether there were male prostitutes in Victoria, London. Because often at times like Jack the Ripper and things, I think quite naturally think of female prostitutes in that time.
Yeah, maybe. Did you see the story today? It was on all of like newspapers and stuff in Mexico. They've claimed to have captured a goblin. Like,
go on.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really look too much into it, but there was a picture of it and stuff, and it had like it was it was essentially a goblin. I don't know if it's a hoax, but I was just like, that is creepy. And the Joe Rogan stuff as well has been massive this week on Twitter about that guy with the UFOs and the crash landing in Brazil and things like that. Again, I'm probably not the best person to be speaking about this because I don't know enough about it, but I know that these things exist and are happening and people are chatting about them.
Yeah, it's a very strange one. I'm not seeing the goblins, but I will look that up. Halo said, I had to research how hard it is to bite through an artery.
Of course you did.
As readers of her work, we know exactly why that is. Yeah, it's that's a strange one. There's a lot of conspiracies. In fact, in the past, through history, even going back a long time before internets and all that sort of stuff, there was some amazing hoax being played from people trying to get kind of fame with it. So it's really interesting, the history behind that. But are you ready for tonight's guest, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really looking forward to chatting to him. And yeah, let's get him on.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, tonight's guest, he is the Washington Post and Amazon charts best-selling author of the Adler and Dwyer thriller series. And he's now promoting this lovely book up in the top corner, Chris, which is The Nice Wine Glass, which is the woman at number 6. Very interesting book, and we'll get him to talk all about that. We will leave links to it in the description as well, so have a look at that afterwards. But everybody, please welcome Matthew Farrell to the show. Hello, Matthew.
Forget me. I want to hear about the goblin in Mexico. Let's just keep going on.
I mean, we can talk about that, but Chris seems to be the man in the info. Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me. And just to show my thanks for you guys having me, I just wanted to match my Halloween movie poster with your T-shirt tonight. So, that worked out.
Yeah, fantastic. I should have worn the black T-shirt. Yeah, brilliant. So great for you to
redder
be
than
here.
his face.
Yeah, great for you to be here, Matthew. Just so everybody knows, where in the world are you coming from today?
So I live in Westchester County, which is about 45 minutes to an hour north of New York City, so in the northeast of the United States.
Fantastic. And there's quite, as we mentioned before, there's quite a few people in the audience that kind of are from the US areas. Again, please let us know where you're from, so we can kind of relay that to Matthew and see just how close the writing community is. Again, what we mentioned about the the research, the Googling, the research for writing purposes. In the audience, if you have any of those sort of responses, please send them in. But Matthew, what about yourself? Is there anything weird that you've ever Googled in the name of research?
Yeah, I mean, like Chris, it's the, how to dispose of a dead body. What's the, pressure point when strangling someone, all that kind of stuff. But I think my weirdest is probably, I tried to look up untraceable poisons. I forget the exact name of it, but the scientist who studies insects. And she was telling me that you can, by the insects that are kind of around a corpse, you can tell how long the body's been dead for, which I thought was very intriguing.
Wow, that is
so I kind of did a little bit of research on that as well, just for different ideas I had, either for what I was writing or what I was thinking of writing. So that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, my the FBI, I'm on many FBI on my internet research for sure.
I mean, on the subject of poison, Matthew, did you I read a whole book once just about mushrooms and how many mushrooms that can actually kill you instantly is insane. Did you come across anything that you thought was like the mushrooms where you're oh, mushrooms are just mushrooms, they're not going to kill people instantly? Did you come across anything like that where you thought, whoa, that's really surreal?
The most interesting thing I came across, which has kind of been used a few times, and actually it's been used in real life, was the eye drops. And you can put, you put eye drops in somebody's food, and it's odorless and tasteless, but it's lethal.
Wow!
So
that's James Bond stuff.
Yeah, I had learned that, before, people started putting it in fiction, whether shows or movies or books, and then someone actually did it, and in real life. So yeah, it's I guess I wasn't the only one looking up how to untraceable poisons at the time.
Yeah, there's probably a substantial list of people who do that. Yeah. Halo says the FBI actually showed up at my parents' house because of some of their digital history. Yeah, I'm not entirely surprised by that. Brilliant. Okay, Matthew, so the first part of the show, which we're going to dive into now, because I've got a feeling we're going to go off track a little tonight, which is absolutely fabulous, but we'll try and stick a little bit to the routine, which is the road to writing. So I'm going to play a little video, and we're going to jump in to see how you got into the writing world in the first place. So, Matthew, please, if you could let everybody know, at what point in your life was writing something that became an inspiration to you, and when did you become aware of that, and what was the first step for you into the writing world as a professional?
Sure. So I was definitely born with the drive and the ability to write. I don't know where it came from. I could never teach a class on how to write or how to write thrillers or anything, because I just sit down and I just do it. So I was, blessed with the gift. I was writing, probably since 5th grade, just,
Wow.
and nothing more than just, I would see something on TV. I grew up in a family of book lovers and horror buffs. So, I would watch Friday the 13th, and then I would write a story about a killer in the woods who are, killing people or whatever. And I would handwrite it in a notebook, and, my mom would type it up, and it would be 3 pages or something. But it was just always in me to want to sit down and write out a story. I would say that I began taking it seriously senior year in high school. I was a terrible, terrible student. Graduated by the skin of my teeth. And I remember vividly, like it was yesterday, I had an idea for a story, and I ended up skipping the rest of the school day just to go home and write about it, because I was just so excited about the idea. And in the latter half of my senior year, I took a creative writing elective just because I said, hey, I know how to write, and that'll be an easy class to pass. And the final exam was, write your own short story. So I wrote a short story, and my teacher gave me a 0 on it, because she was absolutely convinced, based on my history as a student, that I had plagiarized this story, and there's no way that I could have written this on my own. And the only way I could prove to her that I wrote it, and my mom called the school and we pled our case, but didn't help. And the only way I could prove to her that I wrote it was to sit in front of her after school one day and write another piece of the story, which I did. Wow. She gave me an A, and then she screamed at me for about 20 minutes how I was wasting my talent and I needed to take this more seriously, because I was so that's when I started to really recognize that, okay, maybe I could do this. So I attempted my first manuscript right after I graduated, figuring 6 months from now I'll be a famous author and a millionaire, and this will all be great. And then, 20 something years later, my debut came out in 2018. So it was a long, hard journey full of many, many failed manuscripts and rejection letters and coming close a couple times and severe disappointment. I tried to quit writing a couple of times, just said to myself, listen, it's not going to happen. You gave it a great try. Just concentrate on your family and your career and move on. And that would last for a few months. And then I would get some seed of an idea, and I would just be compelled to have to write it. So I'm so thankful that I'm published, because I think I would just be writing manuscripts no one would read for the rest of my life anyway, just because I'm so compelled to do it. But it was definitely a long, long, long journey. My debut, What Have You Done, that came out in 2018. I wrote the first draft of that 20 years before it was published, and then just kind of kept going back to different iterations of what I liked about it, modernizing it. With technology, if you wrote something in the 90s and then you're about to edit something in 2017, the technology's changed so much. So like little changes along the way, but I always liked the seed of that story, so I stuck with it. And along the way, you hone your craft and you get a little bit better at the writing and the editing portion of it and the dialogue and the action, and you just grow. And then it happened. So anybody watching out there who's an aspiring writer who is about to give up or thinks it'll never happen, I would encourage you to keep plugging along, because it took me 20 years and now I'm having the time of my life. So.
But I think that's an incredible story. But I think what I can take from that, a lot of people might have gone through that process and actually given up at the stages where you found that nagging voice in your head to keep going. So it's taken away the question I was going to ask about how do you keep yourself motivated. And you've already kind of mentioned that the stories jump into your mind. And what I'm kind of interested about is how did you find the writing process easy? Because a lot of people find it a big task. So potentially if they're not that interested in carrying on that career and suddenly they've got an idea, they might kind of put it to the side instead of grabbing it and running with it as you did.
Yeah, I would say this industry, you have to be absolutely in love with the craft of writing, because it's a very unforgiving industry. If you're not published and you're trying to get published, it's a constant uphill battle. When you're published, you're trying to stay published, which is a constant uphill battle. If you're a mid-list author, you're trying to become a best-selling author, and it's a constant uphill battle. So, myself, for example, I have a day job and I come home. I'll go to the gym for an hour just to kind of refresh my brain, have dinner with the family, and then I'm back in my office writing for, an hour to 90 minutes. And, that's a commitment. That's something that, if you're not 100%, 1,000% bought into it, it's just, you're going to find an excuse not to do it that night because you're tired or, for whatever reason. I've been lucky where the process of writing for me is so natural that it's just not work. Like I just sit down and it just happens. So, people often ask me, how do I balance, work and life and writing? And I just do. And it's quite effortless for me. And I know that I'm the minority in that group, but I'm just thankful that, when I sit down, by the time I sit down, I kind of know what scene I want to write, and I just write it. That's the end.
Matthew, how do you know that an idea is worth turning into a book rather than just going, oh, that's quite a nice idea? What's the difference?
So for me, all of my ideas all of my ideas always start with a scene that pops in my head. And I have no idea what's going on, who the characters are, what happened in the past, what might happen. It's just that scene in that moment, right? So for The Woman at Number 6, I just saw a woman sitting in bed, blind. Her young son comes into the room and interacts with her. And when the son leaves, she knows to herself that that's not my son. And that was the scene that built this book, right? So how I know it's going to become a book or not is if that scene sticks in my head, it's all I can think about. I become obsessed with it, and I want to know who this woman is, and I want to know why she's blind, and I want to know why she doesn't think that's her son that's coming into the room. And then other scenes will start to pop in around that one scene, and then I'll kind of deconstruct everything and figure out the story I want to make. But there are other times where I'll get a scene and, by the time I wake up the next morning, I've completely forgotten I've even gotten the scene in the first place. And then that's not going to be a book. Or maybe I'll think about it a little bit and I just feel like I'm forcing it. And then I'm like, no, that's not going to be a book. And I'll never abandon the idea totally. I have a huge, long note section on my phone that I'll just jot little things down because although it might not work as a story, it could work as a scene or a subplot or something in a future story. So I'll go through that list, whenever I'm starting a new project and seeing if there's anything that jumps out that I still like that could fit into the main story.
I think that's a fascinating tip of keeping those snippets in a notepad or in your phone, because I've never contemplated it being as something that could fit into another story before some of the ideas I previously had. So I think that's a very valuable tip. What I think from what you were talking about with how you visualize the scene before you sit down and write is also a very valuable tool, because there's a lot of people will just sit there and hope that something comes out when they sit at the keyboard and try to write something. But going away and thinking about the scene and going over that in your mind before you actually sit there and write can really be beneficial as well. In your time when you were battling that journey, was there anything very valuable to you that helped you become a better writer?
So in retrospect, if I could do it all over again, I would reach out and really try to become more embedded in the writing community, not realizing how welcoming everyone is. I was always very intimidated to interact with published authors. I just had this feeling like, oh no, they're up here and I'm unpublished and they wouldn't want to talk to me or give me tips. And, we'll go to Thriller Fest or BoucherCon, and, you guys have Theekson over there. And everyone's just so friendly. Like, we murder people in the worst ways. But in real life, we're all so friendly. I mean, I interact with, I'll have a beer with Harlan Coben and, Lee Child and Michael Conley, and these people should not be talking to me. They're so friendly and they're so willing to share. So I think, coming up, I would have changed things and become more part of the writing community sooner. What really put me over the edge in terms of believing in myself and knowing that this could really be true is there's an author, John Ramsey Miller, who was popular in the 90s and the early 2000s. And I worked with his wife's friend, I think it was. And I was in Philadelphia at the time, and he lived in, I believe it was North Carolina. And we just connected via email, and he took a look at my work, and he became a huge mentor in my life and a huge fan, and passed me along to his agent. And, that particular project I was working on didn't work out, but his encouragement and him being, a published author, kind of validating that, yeah, you're on the right track and you're talented and your work can work, was a huge factor. And then what I think finally put me over the top was with What Have You Done, the final version of it. I hired an independent editor who took it and that was the first time I was through a professional editing process. And that was a huge eye opener for me. I learned so much. It was worth every single penny. And she used to be, she was an editor with the Big Five. I forget which one. And that was huge in terms of, she also validated, like, yeah, this book can sell. We just have to do X, Y, and Z to it.
Yeah.
So those two things were the things that kind of put me over the top.
Were you going to say something, Chris?
I was just going to say, do you think the key to your success in terms of taking a manuscript and making it into a book that people validate, that you've just mentioned, do you think that's your process of that scene? In terms of what struck me when you mentioned that was that you had a why very early on, so many things that you'd want the answers to as a writer, but also as a reader as well, because they kind of go hand in hand. If you're thinking that when you're at the very core of starting to write something, and you've got, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Your reader's going to follow the same journey. So do you feel like that is part of the success that you've had, and how you took that manuscript from the one that's sitting in the drawer to the one that's on the shelf and, in the Amazon charts and New York Times and all that sort of stuff?
That's a great question. I never really thought about that, but perhaps, I mean, listen, my first draft is as shitty as, the next guys. I mean, so my process is this: I'm a pantser, right? So I get the scene in my head. I kind of generally deconstruct what's going to happen. I know how I'm going to start the story. I think I know how I'm going to end the story. And then I just start, right? So, and then once I start, that story just consumes me until the first draft is done. It's all I think about. So I'm thinking about where the characters are going. I'm thinking about the whys. And but to answer your question, I don't have all the whys answered in the first draft. As a matter of fact, with the women at number 6, there is a beautiful, beautiful twist that no one will see coming. It's blowing people away. It's it's usual suspects type of twist. Like it's just leaves your mouth open.
Yeah.
And that twist came to me when we were one copy edit away from it being the book.
Wow.
So bottom of the 9th inning, or as you guys would put in your football terms, like 2 minutes of extended play or whatever.
Last kick of the game, bang.
Yeah. It came to me and it changed the whole book. And I had to go back a little bit and tweak some things to make it work. But, sometimes even the whys come, super late in the game. But to your point, I'm always asking them. So, yeah, it's probably helped versus the manuscripts that's stayed in the drawer. But I think everybody needs manuscripts in the drawer in order to get better. I mean, nobody's going to pick up that and become a Major League Baseball player. It's going to take years of, looking at pitches, swinging the bat, and getting stronger and faster to get.
Yeah. I was going to say there's probably a lot of people that watch this show because we have a lot of aspiring writers and, established writers that watch this show. But I suppose one of the hooks and one of the sticking points for a lot of aspiring writers is they won't necessarily go, I've written this manuscript. It's not getting me where I need to be. I'm going to move on to the next one. A lot of people will stick with they might say, I've written, 80,000 words or 100,000 words or, even more, 120,000 words. I'm sticking with it. I'm selling this. What would your advice be to somebody who was in that zone in terms of they were just stuck in the moment of trying to flog a dead horse, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. So I'll give you a quick story. So I came out with my debut, What Have You Done? It took off. It's selling, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of copies. Everybody's excited. I write the second book thinking, all right, I'm going to write this second book. I got a 2-book contract. Let's do this. I write the entire thing. And the editor's like, no, we don't like it. What else you got? And the what else I got became my second book. I Know Everything. But I had to put that away and get it out of my head in 10 seconds and move on to the next thing.
Wow.
Because now I was in the game. And once you let me in the party, I'm not leaving. It took me 20 years to get there. I will do what needs to be done to continue publishing.
I mean, that must have felt like a real curveball, though, because once you've completed that manuscript, you kind of feel yourself that that's worthy. How did you kind of react to that, them approaching it in that direction of saying they don't like it?
They're the experts. They know what's going to sell. So my day job is I'm in the finance and business world, right? So I come to the publishing genre, the publishing world, always wearing 2 hats. I'm a creative writer, but I also understand that it's a business. And if the business people in the publishing house are going to tell me do this, and we think it's going to work, whether it's title, cover copy, editing the manuscript, whether or not you want the manuscript, whether my idea works or not, I'm going to trust you. So when they said it, I don't even recall frustration or sadness. I just said, okay, let's throw it away and we'll try this other idea. I had enough time from a deadline perspective, so I knew that wouldn't be an issue. And getting back to circling back to the point we made before, there's so many little scenes and things that I used from the discarded manuscript in future work that it all worked itself out anyway. But I would say, for me, when I was coming up, I would do 2 rounds of submissions. So let's say 30 to 50 agents. 30 to 50 agents rejected me. And along the way, I would tweak the query letter and the synopsis and all that kind of stuff. If they all rejected me, I'm on to the next one. Because again, I looked at it as building blocks and steps up to success. So, you know, I would just say, okay, that one was a learning experience. You know, what can I glean from it? What can I do better next time? What do I have to tighten up? And then just move on to the next story. And then, you know, with What Have You Done, my debut, that was an idea that I never really wanted to let go. So there were different versions of the story that I wrote, which ended up being the debut. Other than that, the other ones I would just kind of discard and move on, and just, you know, that was batting practice. I'm not going to show you.
How does like the publishing industry and the publishing world that you're now, you know, fully established in, how does that impact your next manuscript in terms of, like, you know, from the outside looking in? Obviously we interview a lot of authors and we see like a lot of reactionary stuff in terms of, you know, you might have, like, say 50 Shades of Grey, for example, was huge. And then you might have an influx of 50 Shades of Grey type novels. And that, you know, that kind of happens quite regularly. If something's successful, publishing houses are seemingly looking around going, can we have something like that because it's working? Does that have any impact on you in terms of your ideas, or have you ever been like sort of directed to write a certain type of novel or anything like that from a publishing perspective?
No, I mean, you know, what I try to do myself with each novel is I try to do something a little bit different. So, you know, the first book was kind of mostly a whodunit. Books 2, 3, and 4 were kind of a blend of thriller and police procedural. The fifth book I did, The Perfect Woman, was I wanted to write a book that there was no point in the story that gave the reader an opportunity or an excuse to put the book down. I wanted it so tight that every single page something was happening and force you to keep turning the pages. I wrote it to be a one-sit read, right? So that was how I challenged myself on that. And then in this latest one, it's the first book I've ever written that's just a single point of view. So that was my challenge. So I'm always challenging myself to do little turns and tweaks along the way. But, you know, I've never had any pressure from the publisher to write something in an area that mimics a book that exploded. Kind of, you know, that the thriller umbrella, thankfully, is kind of large. So there's a lot of things that can be under there. And I kind of know what I do well. Case in point, the work in progress I'm working on now, I'm in the second phase of editing with my agent. And I originally set out to write that kind of in the vein of Crawdads, right? So it was kind of like there was a mystery involved, but so my challenge for this book was I wanted to challenge myself to really get into the characters and let all of the readers learn and take deep dives into who each character was. Really make it, you know, less thrilling and more of a slow burn, you know, get deep inside the minds of the characters. And it came out to be 105,000 words, and I was pretty pleased with it. And I sent it to my agent, and he sent it back. And long story short, it is now an 85,000 word thriller, back to my regular what I do well. The Crawdad stuff is out, the deep dive on the characters are out, and we just want murder and action. Because I recognize, and he recognized that, you know, what I do well, and the readers seem to react to it, which is the point of the whole thing. And, you know, 2 years from now, by the time the next book comes out, that, you know, that phase of the publishing industry might have died down a little bit, or, you know, maybe just Crawdads itself was just a flash in the pan, and, you know, it was kind of a one-shot deal. It's just kind of its own phenomenon. And so, you know, the advice that you hear throughout the industry is don't ever write to trends, because by the time your book comes out, the trend will be over. Just write to what you're good at. So
it's a great advice. Before we jump into the second part of the show and talk about your brand new book, You mentioned there about writing that book specifically, that every page had action and interest to make you want to read every single page. What advice can you give someone who's writing about doing that themselves? Is there any way that you can manufacture that? And kind of how do you leave each page with wanting more?
So for me, I'm the opposite of a lot of writers. I hate writing the first draft, and I absolutely love editing. And a lot of writers out there, they absolutely adore the creative process of writing that first draft. And then when they have to, take scenes away or kill characters or exclude characters altogether, they can't stand it. And I love it. So for me, I wrote The Perfect Mother as kind of just a regular book, knowing that I would chisel away at it during the editing process, and just took, just really looked at it with a really, really sharp eye and said, do I need this here? No. Is this a spot where you could put the book down? Yes. So I would be eliminating scenes. I took out entire point of view of the husband. I just eliminated it, because every time you turn to the husband, it made the reader take a breath. I don't want the reader to take a breath. I want the reader to just keep turning the pages. So that's kind of how I did it. If you're not into editing, it would be hell on earth for you, because you're just such a fine-tooth comb to make sure every single point of the story keeps telling the story forward. I love it. I love editing.
Do you know, with the success that you've had now, Matthew, do you feel the pressure from a reader perspective in terms of people are picking up your books and going, wow, that was amazing. Like, I couldn't put it down. It's bang, 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 bang. Really invested in the characters, the action, everything that was going on. That was fantastic. Can't wait for this new guy's next book. Like, do you feel that pressure when you're writing a new manuscript? Do you think, there's some people that are going to be fully invested in everything that I've done? They've read everything before this next book, and they're waiting and they're eager. And there's some people that have just picked up, maybe the last one or the first one, and they're going to be having that same expectation. Does it impact you in any way when you're, there at the laptop or on your phone and you're writing the manuscript?
It does not. I write as a fan, and I write, I obviously write for the fans, but I'm really writing for me, because if I'm not excited about the story, then it's going to be a slog. And so I have to be excited about the story and the characters and where things are going for me to even do it. So I don't think about that too much. What I do think about is I've become known in the industry for really, really good twists. And I would say probably 4 out of my 6 books, the consistent feedback I get is, I read, thrillers. I've been reading thrillers for 30 years, and I did not see that twist coming. And that's such a huge compliment. And I'm so thankful for the readers to get, kind of knock their socks off with the twists. But with each book, the pressure to get that twist right increased. So, for example, the work in progress I'm doing now, I've got a twist in there. I know it's not going to be the final twist because it's just not worthy enough. And I, as it is today, I can't think of a twist to put on it. There will be a twist on it by the time it comes out, but the one that's there is not worthy. So that's the little bit of pressure I feel is kind of getting that level of twist that the readers have come to expect.
So with the woman at number 6, which we'll talk about after the next video, when you got that twist so late on in the creative process, were you really excited to have that light bulb moment?
Yeah, so we already had a good twist, so I was okay with the book coming out as it was. I got feedback. It's ironic because the feedback I got from editing notes, that they were confused with something that I wrote, so their feedback was a reflection of that confusion. But what they wrote in the feedback sparked the idea for the twist, and I read it and I was like, holy shit. And I called my editor, and she does not like me to tell her the twists in advance because she likes to be surprised like a reader would be to see if it works. And I said, listen, I got to tell you this twist because we're in the 11th hour. And if I'm going to write it, I got to write it in like the next 2 days. So she's like, okay, tell me. And I told her, and she was like, oh my God, hang up the phone and write this right now. So she was super excited about it. So, it was, I did get excited about it because it was twist that was in there was good, but this was like, oh yeah, this is really good.
That must be lovely. Fantastic. Right, we'll go on to part 2, which is watch the story, and we're going to talk all about the woman at number 6. So we'll play this video and we'll get stuck into it. So Matthew, please could you let everybody know what the woman at number 6 is all about?
Sure. So the woman at number 6 is about a woman named Tracy Cohen. She seems to have an ideal life with her husband, Malcolm, and her son, Finn. But one day, seemingly out of nowhere, Tracy asked Malcolm for a divorce. And that same day, Tracy goes missing. No one knows if she's run away or if she was taken or if she's even still alive. And as the police close in on who they think is their killer, another body is found in a different jurisdiction. And they have to figure out if it's all connected. Was the husband Malcolm behind any of it? And as you go down the journey with all of these characters, your questions get answered in many unexpected ways.
It's a very interesting story, but what kind of inspired you to go down this route and have it more, as you mentioned, as well from like the first perspective? Why did you go down this route and write this particular story?
It was this, like I said, it was the scene that popped into my head, and I just wanted to know about this, this woman who couldn't see, lying in bed, and why did she not believe that her son was her son? And so I started deconstructing the story. And, like I said, I'm a pantser, so I knew, we were going to start off and she was going to kind of ask her husband for a divorce, and then she was going to go missing. And then, I don't want to give away too much here, but there's many different paths that could have happened to her. And it was a fun thing to write in terms of, everyone always thinks it's the husband. If you watch a Lifetime movie and someone, the wife dies, it's always the husband. If you read a book and the wife dies, it's always the husband. And so, this is one of those books where you're reading it and you're like, well, is it going to end up being the husband? Is it somebody else going on? So, and I just wanted to point one thing out with the readers, because I'm writing and promoting this book at the same time. So this book is multiple point of view. This was my last multiple point of view book. And the book I'm working on with my agent now is the one that was. Okay,
apologies.
No, it was my mistake.
What's the feedback been like from the readers to this reaction and the twist in this? Has it been what you expected, or has there been any surprises from readers?
It's been what I've hoped.
Okay.
But they are absolutely blown away. Because what another kind of thing that I've been known for is you get more than one twist with me. So there's twists along the way. I always like to put some kind of a surprise in the middle of the story to kind of break up. And I get that from Gone Girl. Gone Girl is one of the books where I had an actual out loud reaction when I was reading it. I turned to the next chapter and she was alive, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And I did not see that coming. And I thought it was brilliant to put that in the middle of the book, because then your perspective immediately changes for the rest of the book. So I've done that on my last 2. So there's different twists along the way, which were fun. So I love the fact that the readers come out of it and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know what was up and what was down. And then you got me on the last thing and I didn't see it coming. They seem to be having a great time with it, which is
That's fantastic.
Matthew, if you've got people that are like really experienced, and I said that in inverted commas, twist hunters. So they pick up a book and they go, I'm going to figure this out. And they look at, as they're reading, they go, right, I'm noting that character. He could be significant. He's only been mentioned once, but he could pop up again, and all that type of stuff. So I suppose the question is, how do you know when a twist is that mind-blowing twist as opposed to just that's a good twist?
Because again, I'm writing as a fan. And when I put that twist in there, and if I go, oh shit, that's going to be good, then I know that they're going to read it and say, oh shit, I did not see that coming. Or at least that's what I hope. Yeah. And with this particular book, and I've posted some of the reviews on my social media, but I have gotten those reactions where I've been reading thriller books for 20 years. I did not see that coming. I was, dead certain it was this person, and I cannot believe you pulled the wool over my eyes on that. I've had one that said I got to the end and read that final twist and had to go back through the rest of the book to see how I missed the breadcrumbs. So I think
that's what's brilliant about having stories with big twists and things. Behind Your Eyes, have you read that?
No.
Sarah Pinborough. That was put into a TV show as well, and that was one of the biggest twists. It was a twist followed by a bigger twist, and a biggest twist that kind of blew my mind. And that was one of the things that made me want to completely go back and watch it all again, because you just saw it completely different and different perspective, and that's such a powerful thing to be able to do with a story. You mentioned back then as well how you post some of your reviews on social media. I mean, that is something that is kind of new for authors to deal with. Because of the way social media is now. Do you think that can be a benefit to an author, potentially getting advice from readers directly?
So I've had a few. So normally, and now that the book is published, I will stick to this with the newest one as well. I don't read any reviews. I'll pull up Amazon, and if I'm between 3.8 and 5 stars, then life is good and I move on. I don't read anything, specific. I do read the reviews in the NetGalley process just to see how the initial, reviewers are kind of thinking about the story, and that's fine. The Amazon reviewers can get very, very mean, and it can really, strip you away of any confidence that you think you have as a writer. They can also be, extremely uplifting and give you reviews that, just you go to sleep smiling that night. What I've heard from other authors is if they're going to read the reviews to see how they can do better next time, they tend to read the 3-star reviews, because those are reviewers that seem to take the time to critique it in a way that it just doesn't say, this book sucks, I don't know how this person's ever a professional. They really take the time to tell you why they didn't, or like what didn't work for them. I don't do that, but I know plenty of authors that do, and they'll read the 3 stars.
That's a very interesting way to look at it. Yeah, really good. Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to move on to the final part of the show because time is pressing on, and we got some other random questions to ask, of course. If you've got questions for Matthew, please start sending them in now. They could be for Matthew, for us as a whole, whatever you want, send them in. And we'll get on to part 3, and we'll talk to Matthew about some staple questions in the show right after this video. So, Matthew, I'll start us off with the staple questions for the show, and hopefully some audience questions will come in as well. If you could take a character from the world of fiction, whether that's in literature, on TV, in movies, whatever that might be, and use that in one of your stories, what character would you like to take away and why?
So when you sent me this question so I could kind of mull it over, I mean, that's a hell of a great question. I think I'm landing on Hannibal Lecter.
Ooh, yes, great answer.
He's one of my favorite characters in literature, and he's so well done in terms of he's so dark yet so refined that he's the ultimate Venus flytrap. He looks beautiful on the outside, and the moment you get close, you're dead. And so, I think I could take that character on some really cool adventures in my own world.
What do you think, Matthew, of Thomas Harris in terms of, obviously he had great success with those novels. And then he released one recently, well, relatively recently, about, maybe 5 to 8 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, but he seems to have not done anything else since those. Like you just said, you would love to take Hannibal on a different journey and, and expand that world and things like that. Like, I suppose my question is, why do you think that some writers just limit themselves to going, do you know what, this is me, I've done my bit, I've done my time, I'm out.
I heard that he was trapped under the $50 million in cash that he made on the Hannibal look. So he might still be trying to climb up from that pile of cash to write something different. No, I don't know. I don't know. Some people, the writing process is different for everyone. Like I was saying before, I'm compelled to do it. I'll write whether have a publishing contract, I don't, I'm 20 years old or I'm 80 years old. It's just in me. Some people, it's more of a process and really, really hard work for them. So perhaps they get to a point in their career and they've kind of made it. They've made enough money to sustain themselves, and they don't really want to do it anymore. And that's cool too. Everybody's on their own journey.
Yeah, I mean, the second question that we got, that's one of the staple questions, is if you could change the ending to any novel, TV series, or film, which ending would you change and why? And yes, Red Dragon is a very creepy book. It's got one of the best antagonists ever, in my opinion.
Red Dragon was amazing. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have this show over there, but there was a show that lasted for 4 seasons called The Glades. It was a detective show, almost in the vein of like kind of a Dexter type of a show.
Nice.
In a detective set in the Everglades in Florida. So you had that whole Florida vibe like you did in the early Dexter shows. And the main detective there, so there's 4 seasons, and at the end of the 4th season, see, Brandon knows what I'm talking about. The end of the 4th season, the main character, who's the detective, walks into a house and gets shot. They did not make a 5th season.
Ooh.
No, so I was like, and they didn't, obviously the writers didn't know that they were going to get canceled. So changing the ending, I would change in terms of if you knew that wasn't if the 5th season wasn't coming, I would kind of have him get shot a little bit earlier in the season and we find out who did it and why. But to this day, I'm like, God damn it. Did he live? Did he die? What happened? Who did it? I never know.
What I think we're seeing a lot more of lately are TV shows that people get into, and then they're cancelled after 1 or 2 seasons, and people really enjoy them and don't see why they get cancelled. I think that's just because of the saturation in the market, and we're able to create so much now, which is a benefit. But that's kind of a strange thing to me, that they would get good feedback, maybe not the viewing figures they wanted, and perhaps, like you said, Matthew, that's a complete business perspective. It's not making the money, so we're not going to make it.
Well, what's encouraging is there's been a few times where there's such a social media uproar where they'll come out with like a quick 1 or 2 episode season just to kind of wrap everything up, which is nice. It does get frustrating.
Well, our final question, Matthew, is a pretty morbid one. I'm not going to lie. But you're on your deathbed and you're looking back at your writing career. What does success look like to you? What would you be happy with?
I wouldn't change a thing, and I'm happy with the way things are right now. I hope that I continue kind of climbing that ladder of success as more books come out. But, if I didn't, I'm the type of person when I was younger to take things for granted. And as I get older, I'm not. So if I was successful out of the gate at, 20, 21 years old, I would have blown every advance dollar that they'd given me thinking that the money was going to last forever. I would have taken for granted that, getting published is easy and I don't have to work as hard as you really do have to work. So I needed, everybody's different, but I needed to go on that journey, and I needed to get published when I got published so I could be a little bit more responsible with the responsibility of being a published author. I mean, it's not, a a lot of us are introverts, but you can't really hide behind your laptop typing away. There's a business element to it. You need to get out there, do things like this, meet fans, get yourself out there. And I don't think I would have appreciated that as much if I didn't go on the journey I did. So I wouldn't change anything.
It's a fantastic answer. Really is. And we completely agree. We've discovered this on the show, and we've spoken to people behind the scenes that can really relate to that the way you mentioned. It's not just about creating the work these days, it's about being a brand yourself as well. So having that author brand and representing that on social media and interacting with people in the business, like you mentioned, is a really crucial thing to do. So yeah, that's great advice for anyone. A really good answer.
I've got one more question before we go to the community, if that's all right. Because you mentioned having a beer with the likes of Harlan Coben, Lee Child, and Michael Connolly. Like, those names are instantly recognizable around the world. What sort of nuggets of writing advice have you taken from each of those whilst you've been having a couple of beers and things like that? Do they talk about writing, or is it just solely, we're having a beer, be quiet about writing? Like,
come on, Chris. Yeah, let's get the proper stories out.
Yeah, I mean, I could ask what's what's the most interesting story of the three, but I feel like as a writing community chat show, we should bring the writing advice.
I can't really say, because once the conversation started, I blacked out because I was like, what the fuck are you doing talking to these people? And then and it was over. But no, they were great. We did not talk about writing at all for any of them. And it wasn't a half hour kind of beer chat anyway. You're at a convention, there's a lot of people that want to talk to them, but you get them in a corner. And I follow Harlan. We live one state away from one another, and we've kind of had similar journeys along the way to getting published. So I follow him on social media, and I kind of know, he's a huge hockey fan. His sons played hockey, and I played hockey. So that was kind of, talk about that kind of stuff. But they're regular dudes, and they're super, super nice. And everyone in the writing community is so awesome. It's crazy.
I'd love to go to horror. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, man. I was going to say, does that give you a sense of like these guys are almost so normal that like the success that they've had, I can achieve that as well? Because if they can do it, and they are just they're guys that go to hockey, and we have beers together and things like that. There's nothing. I suppose my question is, there's nothing special about them in that respect that you could potentially achieve that success as well, obviously with perseverance and keeping going and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's more of a, especially in today's publishing world, it's more of kind of, if we've all got talent, right? A publishing house is not going to sign you if you don't have talent. So it's a matter of, is your story good enough to catch on? And if it catches on, how far does it go? And that will bring you to the different levels of kind of the publishing hierarchy. And, when Harlan was 6 books in, my 6th book just came out. When he was 6 books in, he wasn't Harlan Coben yet. And he was getting there, but he wasn't there yet. And, Stephen King was Stephen King, by his 2nd book. So it all happens in different parts. James Patterson wasn't James Patterson until, he was much older. And now he's his own publishing house pretty much. So they're all, they all sit down and write the story that they believe in, just like all of us. So in that respect, they're not any different than us. And, you just have to keep writing and hope it happens.
Brilliant. Right, so we got some questions, a couple of them. The very first one is a bit random from Brandon. Thank you. He says, big or little spoon?
Big spoon. No idea what he's talking about, but I'm going big spoon. I'm an American.
Definitely go big spoon. Anya says, who is the scariest serial killer that's ever lived?
Boy.
Chris, I'll open that up to you as well.
What's that?
I'll open that up to Chris as well, so we've got some time to think about this. It's a tough one.
I'm gonna go Ted Bundy, only because he wasn't scary on the outside. And man, he's like that Hannibal character where his charm just draws you in and you're done.
I think that is the creepiest when the historical serial killers have been almost indistinguishable from anyone on the street. You know, and if you saw someone scary coming down the road, you're going to avoid them. But when they're very befriending and, you know, possibly a neighbor, that's probably more scary, isn't it?
100%. I mean, if John Wayne Gacy's walking down the street with his clown costume on, I'm going to go lock the door.
Yeah.
And
Chris, have you got one for that?
I think just for level of creepiness, Jeffrey Dahmer is right up there.
I mean, that show recently has been on Netflix. Has gone down the storm, hasn't it?
It has, which I mean says a lot about society in terms of like what people are interested in, but in terms of the things you did and what you got away with, and just, you know, there's so many things, and that it's scary from a human society point of view in terms of that actually happened and played out the way they did, and there's so many things that could have happened to prevent certain things, and they just didn't, because of the human condition and loads of different things. Like, yeah, scary on multiple levels.
What's scary on a human level is like when Jack the Ripper was around, Scotland Yard had someone hand themselves in or write letters to suggest that they were the one who had killed everybody, and they were, you know, leaving clues or whatever, and their entire investigation was sidetracked for 4 months while killings were still going on, because of someone hoaxed them saying that it was them that did it, which is just crazy to think there are people out there that wanted to take the glory of that. You know, they weren't the ones doing the killing, but they were trying to distract and take the glory of it, of the media. So, you know, it's definitely a strange world at times. But yeah. Great answer. Good. Let's get one more in there. We've just gone over the hour, so we'll try and be quick with this. Halo says, what is the best advice to maintain a positive mindset through rejections? Which is a great question.
So I know rejections can be super annoying because 9.5 out of 10 of them are just boilerplate. Thank you for your submission. We're going to pass. And they don't give you any kind of feedback, which is super annoying. I would just say, I would submit expecting rejections, because we all have to go through it. That's the process. And, you know, if so when you get them, it doesn't hurt as much, and you just kind of put it to the side and move to the next thing. And if you get one where, especially today, it's a little bit easier with, you know, email and social media, but if you get one that gives you a little bit of feedback, or that you could tell it's a little bit more than just a boilerplate answer, you know, don't be afraid to reach back out and just say, hey, listen, is there any advice you can give me on what worked or what didn't work? If they don't get back to you, you're in no further space than you were before. So it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
If you don't ask, you don't get. Definitely. Do it.
And I like the idea of how you've come across in the interview as well, of using all the information that you've received as positive criticism and positive feedback to benefit your own career as well. I think that's really important for anyone to do, is to positively move that forward in the right way. Fantastic. So one thing before we do finally wrap up, the last question we'll give to you is, where can people find The Woman at Number 6, and where can people find out a little bit more about you?
So all of my books, including The Woman at Number 6, can be found wherever books are sold. Most people go to Amazon, available in print, audiobook, and Kindle. They can find out about me. I'm terrible with my social media stuff, but it's at M Farrell Writer for Twitter. I think it's Matthew Farrell Books for Facebook. I have an Instagram and a TikTok. I have no idea what those are, but just Google me. If you Google Matthew Farrell author, you'll find anything you want to know about me.
You definitely will. And there are links in the description, guys, that you can get onto as well. So you can find them in there. But Matthew, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. It's been fantastic. There are definitely some brilliant snippets of information and advice in there as well. So thank you so much. We hope you've had a good time. Chris, anything else before we wrap this up?
Yeah. I mean, I just want to thank Matthew for putting that poster up in the effort just to match us with your lovely orange and my black with the Halloween.
Yep.
Reference. But yeah, thank you, Matthew. It's been absolutely brilliant, and
I had a great time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Definitely check that book out and support the authors. We'll be back next week with another show. Have a great long weekend. If you're in the UK, bank holidays, pick up The Woman at Number 6 today. It's out, right? It's out now.
Oh yeah,
Pick
it's
it up.
out. Ready to roll.
Get it sorted, and let us know what you think about the big twist at the end as well. Matthew, thank you so much, and everybody stay safe. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Bye bye.